Trial captivating a nation.
The defense had questions about initial evidence collected in red Solo cups.
Solo cups and stuff put in bags.
You don't know where the DNA that's on those things is coming from.
What can we expect from Cross?
A lot.
The cross-examination has been described as aggressive.
I think they have to be very strong with the cross here because they're not allowed to bring in their own expert to talk about police procedures and policies.
NBC 10 News has the latest on the retrial of Karen Read.
Hello, everyone. I'm Tamara Sacharczyk. This is our daily debrief of the Karen Read murder retrial. Katie Benoit, our reporter who's been at court in Dedham every day during this trial, is here with us. She was in the courtroom today. Katie, today obviously a big day. Closing arguments took place, and currently the jury is officially deliberating. The case is in their hands. Let's start with the closing arguments. What did both sides emphasize?
So closing arguments went quite a while this morning. Hank Brennan went about a little over an hour and 15, and then Alan Jackson went even longer than that. And they both really laid out their case for the jury one last time. Now, the judge did remind the jury that closing arguments are not evidence. But basically, the defense said in their case that there was no collision, that didn't happen, and that the police didn't do a proper investigation. They brought up Trooper Michael Proctor, who's since been fired. He sent those inappropriate texts, and they were read in the first trial, the second trial. So that was brought up, and kind of just about the police investigation itself. Remember, we heard about red Solo cups, not securing the crime scene. These things were all brought up. And then the prosecution kind of focused on the clips they've been playing in court with Karen Read speaking to media outlets. And they said that she hit O'Keefe, left him to die, and kind of, spoke about the victim a bit. Talked about he was kind and helped other people. He took in his niece and nephew, and really kind of focused on some of the things Read had said outside of court in their closings.
Now, Karen Read obviously did not take the stand. I mean, what's the overall impression on that? We know that she has so many supporters there at the courthouse. Of course, there's also the opposition who thinks that she is guilty. Was this a strategic move?
There are a lot of supporters here. At the beginning of the trial, there really weren't that many, but over the last couple of weeks, we've seen more and more people show up. And today, there's the most I've seen here during the second trial. During the first trial, I definitely think there was a lot more, but there's quite a bit here today. We kept asking, are you going to testify? Are you going to testify? And it seemed like it maybe wasn't a last minute decision. A lot of legal experts thought she probably wouldn't testify all along. But what is kind of interesting is these clips being played in court for the jury by prosecutors. So the jury did hear from Karen Read regardless, but she did not take the stand. So it really wasn't a surprise, I don't think, but definitely it was something that people were wondering, would this happen in the second trial?
Right, and that's something that I did want to mention, Hank Brennan specifically, putting up the media clips, because as we know, Karen Read has been very vocal about her case. There's, documentaries about it. So people have heard for sure her side of the story. The jury, like you said, not in person, but in these clips. And I know that Brennan referenced Read's statement about the possibility that she backed into O'Keefe, saying that came from, that documentary where she said, I don't think I hit him, but acknowledged she could have clipped him. What was the reaction in court during that, with him emphasizing this on the last day? Like you said, this isn't evidence, so you can't really persuade the jury. But at the same time, when you present an argument like that, that's very persuasive, you're obviously trying to get them to your side.
Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, we weren't selected by the randomizer to be in the courtroom this week, but I am here at the courthouse, obviously keeping a close eye on everything. But the jury, when I was in there, will be in there next week. So if there is a verdict next week, we'll be in there. But the jury was pretty observant. This case was very long. It was 8 weeks. So a long time. And a lot of them were taking notes during the trial. Some were not, but many were. So I think, hearing these last final statements, it kind of wraps up the case, maybe reminds them of things that they had written down just because it was so long. But, definitely just listening to the case being laid out again and just kind of hearing this, but obviously not evidence. So they could not write anything down about the closing arguments.
Right. You and I know, as reporters who have been in courtrooms, how powerful closing arguments can be. Obviously, like I said, they're trying to persuade jurors to their side. It's really their last chance to say, this is my entire case wrapped up in a bow. Here you go. And Judge Cannoni had one last message to the jurors. we do want to play that for you if we can.
Jury, I need not remind you that you have an important responsibility, but I believe that you will bring to bear all the wisdom and the judgment and conscience that you possess in reaching your verdict in this case. All that we can expect from you is that you decide the case with integrity and with principle. We all expect you to reach an impartial verdict dictated by your logic, without bias, without prejudice or sympathy, and not prompted by any facts except those that you've heard here in court during the trial. We are looking for impartial judgment dictated by your reasoning and the fullest discharge of your oaths as jurors. You may retire and deliberate your verdict.
So with that, it's now in the hands of the jury. Katie, when did deliberations begin, and how long are we anticipating that they could last?
So they just started a little while ago. I don't even think they've been in there for a half hour. Around 2:40, they were sent off. And there were some discussions about the verdict slip. Last year, there was a mistrial. So this is something Read's defense team has really been focusing in on, trying to make it less confusing for the jury. So there were some discussions about that as well. So it's unclear exactly when they're getting that verdict slip, but they did go off to deliberate. It could be a couple days. It could be quick. You never know. In the mistrial, it did take multiple days to come back with the verdict. So there's so much evidence in this case, and the judge really encourages the jurors, to sit down, talk about it, go over the evidence. Don't just come in the room and just vote, say, hey, I think this, I think that. So if they look through the evidence and do their due diligence, it could take days.
Right. And something else that I found interesting in this case is that it seemed to move faster than the first one. I know that Special Prosecutor Hank Brennan did call fewer witnesses than the first time around. Was that talked about at all?
I think that this trial, it's interesting because witnesses like Brian Higgins, Brian Albert, Michael Proctor have not been called, and they were called in the first trial. And these people are, they're referenced a lot in the testimony, in the closing arguments, in the opening statements they were referenced. So I think it might be hard for the jury to not have these people testify when they're, involved in some of the things that had happened. So that's definitely really different from the first trial. Also, the first trial, there were a lot of half days. This time, pretty much every single day was a full day. So I think that kind of helped get through the witness process quicker, where last time there were some full days, some short days. There's a week off, I think, at one point, or multiple days off in a row. So this time the trial has kind of just been going, if that makes sense.
Yeah, which I'm sure that everyone favors at the end of the day, because what you want is a result with these trials. Now that it's in the jury's hand, deliberations have begun. Have you seen Karen Read or any of her supporters since then, or any of the people who are against Karen Read in this trial and do believe that she hit John O'Keefe? What's the atmosphere overall there at the courthouse now that the jury has this?
So there are a lot of supporters here. As I was kind of mentioning earlier, the amount of supporters of Karen Read have grown. There have also been some counter protesters who were here for John O'Keefe and his family. I've seen some pictures of that. I haven't seen it myself personally, but have seen some pictures, with everyone on social media kind of talking about what's going on. So there are a lot of people here every single day in the last few days, but today would be the most I've seen so far during the second trial. And then there was a lot of differences this trial with the buffer zone. So it was changed. So basically kind of where I'm standing, last trial, there would be a lot of supporters around the green area. This time, with some changes, the supporters are right in front of the courthouse and they're silent. A lot of them are wearing pink, but they cannot make any noise. They can't, hear, do, or say anything that the jury could possibly hear. So they're pretty quiet, but they're sitting out there in lawn chairs. I don't know if you can see it from here with all the cars, but they are there.
Yeah, we can see a few people behind the police car behind you in pink. So it looks like those are her supporters there. There's obviously a possibility that this does end in another mistrial. Is that something that's been talked about at all? Do you think there are concerns that could happen?
I think it's possible. Anything's possible. You never know what the jury's thinking. Again, a lot of evidence, a lot to consider. So it's definitely a possibility. We'll know when the jury comes back. They might come back with a few questions. That happened last trial. They came back with a couple of questions before eventually a mistrial was declared. So they might have a few questions. And if they start to come back and say, hey, we can't reach a verdict, that could be a sign that they're having a hard time in there.
Right. So how long are deliberations supposed to last until today? What time does the court close?
So the judge had mentioned up until 5:30 today. The court usually closes at 4:30. It wasn't something I don't believe was discussed again inside of court, but the court officers were supposed to call the members of the jury and talk to them and see if they could get here early today and stay late today. Actually, this was supposed to start earlier today, closing arguments, but there was a holdup and things didn't get started until closer to 10. The judge wanted right at 9 o'clock those closing arguments to happen, but didn't end up until 10. There was a couple sidebars this morning, unclear exactly what it was about.
All right. So I'm sure there will be no news out of the deliberations today because, like you said, this could take some time. They could have questions. This could go on for a few days or so. But Monday could be a big day.
Yeah, definitely. Next week, if there's nothing today, they'll be back Monday, going back into the room and looking over evidence. We did get to see in my story yesterday, there's all the evidence laid out in the courtroom that was in my story. So they'll be going back with all that evidence to look at. And it's a lot. So they could be back there for a while in the courtroom next week. So if there is a verdict, we'll be right there to hear it. So.
All right, Katie. Well, I will let you get to work. We do have a 7 o'clock newscast tonight, so I know you're probably busy preparing for that. And we also have a streaming newscast online at 6 p.m. at turnto10.com. Of course, we will continue to follow this trial, especially as the jury deliberations do continue. Again, they started today. They will continue next week, and then hopefully we'll have a verdict at some point early next week, but we will stay on top of that. You can see Katie's full reporting tonight online at 6 o'clock at turnto10.com. And again, at 7 p.m. on the air, we have no 4, 5, or 5:30 newscast at all. So you have to wait until that 6 o'clock newscast on our website. But of course, you can always find our Karen Read coverage in general on our website, as well as our YouTube page. Just search NBC 10 WJAR. All right. Have a great day, everyone.
The trial captivating a nation, on the scene to keep you informed at every turn.
The defense brought up some inconsistencies with this testimony.
The lies and the dishonesty in this case is overwhelming.
With live updates and legal analysis.
Set that up for me. Why?
So the text messages between them kind of set up this argument that happened.
It's to show that they weren't always lovey-dovey.
He testified today that there was no fighting. They seemed normal. Nothing was going on.
Harry, John's dead.
NBC 10 News has the latest on the retrial of Karen Read.